Today, we have some friends with us, friends that we've been homeschooling with for many, many years. And we're just going to talk a little bit about what we call collaborative homeschooling and what that's about. We're just going to also talk a little bit about who we are and our families, and so people can get an idea about that. So just this will be going on our website, but people might not know. I'm Ollie, and my husband Michael is another person up there. And we've been homeschooling for our oldest child that we homeschooled is 20. He's going in his junior year of college. We have 4 children, ranging in age from 32 to 13, being our youngest. So the 32-year-old went all the way through public schools, and the 18 and 20-year-old went all the way through homeschooling, and they're both in college. And the 13-year-old we're still homeschooling. We also have 2 grandkids, a 3 and a 6-year-old, and the 6-year-old is going to public school, but will be doing homeschool this fall, since public school is not going to be happening. And actually her mom is thinking about collaborative homeschooling with 2 other families. So that actually got me thinking about talking about this. Do you want to add anything else about our family, Michael?
I guess one thing I would say is that Ollie and I, we actually met as elementary school teachers. So we come to homeschooling with an strong background in formal education and teaching, but don't let that be discouraging to any of you. It's there are things that have helped with that, but in some ways that could even be an obstacle to what you want to do, because the homeschool environment is, or at least can be, so different than the role of a teacher in a public or private school. So that's one thing I'd add.
Yeah, we had to unlearn a lot of things. We kind of, when we first started homeschooling, set up a classroom and kind of backpedaled from that in some ways. But we could talk about that a little further. But why don't we have Gary? Do you want to tell us about your family and about you're beginning homeschooling?
Sure. My family right now is a 17-year-old in high school and a 14-year-old who's going to be starting high school soon, although because of COVID, she's going to be starting it at home, taking classes online. We started homeschooling when my older one was going to be starting 2nd grade. So he went through kindergarten and 1st grade in the normal Columbus public schools. And we had been feeling like we wanted to try homeschooling, mostly because we saw what Ollie and Michael and Suzanne had been doing with their families, and we're just so impressed that it was going so well. And we thought that our son would really benefit from it. And so we started when he was starting 2nd grade, and at the same time started with our youngest. She was still preschool, but she really wanted to be participating too, and continued with that for 7 years. The younger one, Claire, started back to school, back to Columbus Public in the 5th grade. She just really wanted the experience of going to school, and then my son decided he wanted to go to high school in 9th grade. So that's how we are right now. We're both kids are in Columbus Public for high school, but we did homeschool for 7 years, and largely through collaboration with Ollie and Michael's family and Suzanne's family and some other families too. And maybe I'll pass it back to you, Ollie.
Okay, well, we'll just let Suzanne take over and tell us about her family homeschooling.
Hi, I'm Suzanne, and I have 4 children. My oldest is going to be a senior in college, And then I have a daughter who's going to be a senior in high school, and I have a son going into 8th grade, and I have an 8-year-old. So we just realized we're going to have like triple graduation at the end of this school year with 8th, 12th, and college. So um, we've been homeschooling for a long time. My oldest, who's 21, went to Columbus City Schools for kindergarten and first and second grade. And at that point, we began homeschooling and have homeschooled since that time. He homeschooled through about 3rd grade through 8th grade, and then went to high school, and went to a private high school. And then my next child in line, we are homeschooling through high school, and so still homeschooling my 8th grader and my 8-year-old.
Do you know why you started? Actually, I asked both you guys that, but I'll start with Suzanne. Like, why did you decide to take Aaron out of school and start homeschooling him?
I guess I'd have to trace it back to when Aaron was actually really young, like even before being in school. We lived in one of these old homes in Columbus. It's great that has big front porches. And so my neighbor, kind of across and diagonal from us, was homeschooling her 3 children. And I just used to watch her sit out on that front porch reading books out loud to her kids. And I just had that vision, I think, planted in my mind of like, wow, school looks so pleasant over there at their house. And so definitely had the kind of seeds of the idea of homeschooling in my mind, um, watching Barb homeschool her 3 children. And then kind of didn't maybe have the courage to jump on it when my oldest was going into kindergarten, but really always had it in the back of my mind. And finally, after about 3 years, and he really had a lot of great experiences at his school, but at a certain point, I realized, we're either going to try this now or we're not ever going to try it. So we, I guess we just decided to try it for a year and see where it was going to go, and here we are. Like, I don't know how many years later it is, but more than 10, probably 12 or 13. I don't know.
Okay, Gary, how about you guys?
Well, I guess I would say that one of the things that was going on from the time my youngest was about 1.5, we participated in a play group with a number of families, including Elaine Michaels and Suzanne's family, and it was a great experience for my kids. They really got close to the kids there, and it just so happened that some of the kids were also homeschooled, and we got a chance to see what it was like for those kids, what kind of experiences they were having in homeschool, and we knew what it was like to be in normal public schools, and it was so different that we thought that our son would fit in well with the homeschool thing, but family members, extended family members, were kind of wanting us to really go the traditional route, and so we signed him up for kindergarten, and it actually went pretty well. And then 1st grade rolled around, and it was looking kind of grim for him, and he wasn't really enjoying it much at all. And at the same time, we were still doing playgroup and seeing these other kids having a lot of fun and doing lots of really cool things. So we decided for 2nd grade we'd give it a try, and it was always, well, we'll try it for this 1 year and see how that goes. And it went great, and it went great for quite a while. And I would say it went great the whole time. My kids were ready for something new after about 7 years. But I enjoyed the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we didn't start talking about our play group, so that's kind of how we met each other. Or I don't know, you guys maybe knew each other through preschool before the play group. I don't know, but around that time maybe. But that was back. You said Aaron was 1.5. So what year would that have been?
That would be 2005. So
Okay, yeah, that's, I thought it was
I'm
before
thinking
that.
about my daughter's birth year, but yeah, so way back.
Way back. So, and this play group was real important, I think, for all our families, and there were quite a few families involved in it. That we would meet one day a week, and kind of planned our years around that. That we would choose the day that people weren't doing their preschool experience, or so that we could meet. The kids played, the adults connected. We always had food. It was a I think we all really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. So, um, and I think that, like you guys said, that some kids started going to school and some kids were being homeschooled, and the play group was still happening because we had kids at various ages, and so we were all still really connected. And I think we all really enjoyed each other's company. So the kids enjoyed each other's company, but the adults also. I mean, play group was very much for the adults, and I would say homeschooling has been really good for the adults too, in general, in terms of connecting with other adults, and with learning an awful lot, and learning together, and just having fun together. And we can talk more. We've extended this now that we do many other things together, camping trips as families. There's a big garden slash farm that's that people are doing now together. Parties together. There's just been a lot of things that have come out of that initial play group, and creating community. And one of the other things that's about our three families is we all have one person who's a stay-at-home parent. So I'm the stay-at-home parent, although Michael's really involved with the homeschooling. And Gary, you're the stay-at-home parent, and Suzanne's a stay-at-home parent. So all our families had decided that years ago that we were going to have a stay-at-home parent, and then we just all three of our families still have a parent at home.
Holly, can I chime in on the play group a little bit? Because,
Please.
and I've thought this for a long time, that we really reaped the benefits of all that time we invested in getting to know each other and working together, and working out conflicts, and just all that time getting to know each other was so helpful for when we homeschooled. I think all that sharing food. I mean, the way we did play group was, it was Friday or whatever, it was whatever day it was that week, and you came if you could, and you didn't if you couldn't come that week. And it was like potluck, either snack, or sometimes we would do lunch potluck. So I think I really see it like a clear line of continuity between kind of how we did play group, and Gary, you were the one who set the play group up, and how we did that, or at least you were organizing it when I joined. And I see a real clear line between how that happened and how we invested in getting to know each other as families, and then how we were able to then create something together for homeschooling.
So Gary, I don't know if you have anything you want to say about anything else about play group, or about.
Sure. I like I said, we started when my oldest was just a year and a half, and I was already staying home all the time with him, and it was just a lifesaver for me to actually have interaction with other adults. And the play group was already established. Just I ended up just kind of organizing it. I set up an email list, so that was the way we kept it going. But it was already, I think, well established by the time we started, and it just felt really comfortable to just have all these families nearby that we could drop in on, and it was great. And I think we kept it going until well beyond. I think it was probably 2014 or 15 by the time it was just outlived its being able to keep going, but a long time. At some point, like 8 or 9 years into it, we calculated we had shared already like 500 meals together or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I gotta say, and I know it's hard in this time of COVID, but I really believe that sharing food's an important part of homeschooling together. Yeah.
As you're all talking, I mean, I think sometimes when people are thinking of homeschooling, you immediately start thinking about, okay, what about the math? And, what about the, science curriculum? And those things are, of course, part of it. But, listening to you all and thinking about all these years we've been interconnected and I'm thinking, as you all have said, food. So, even if people have different dietary needs or restrictions, which is true of our circle, that's one thing that I would say is if you're going to do collaborative homeschooling, it's like have some food together, right? and 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 the other thing that's coming through here for me is, relationships, connections, community. And that's among the children, which of course our children are, I mean, my gosh, it's amazing, to look at our 20-year-old who has had these friends since he was a preschooler, and that we've had this same circle of friends too. I mean, we feel connections with each other's children, but of course, as adults, our friendships and our relationships, and all of that's related to joy, right? So that I think these are things that you might not think of as, top tier as you're thinking about homeschooling. And one other thing, at least one other, there's probably more that will pop up for me, but I'm thinking of home. Whether you have someone who's a full-time person at home or not, that I think we as families have all tried to create, not just a safe space, but, sense of joy, all of that. What just happened in the background?
Misha, as you can see him in the mirror, he was exercising outside and he's sliding by, so he would not be in the video. There's the 20-year-old.
There you go.
He was in the video for really clearly.
That was the 20-year-old.
That was the 20-year-old, yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
so the sense of play never dies in the home, right? So anyway, I mean, just that, all of that kind of comes to mind in terms of, I guess part of my invitation to anybody who's out there thinking, oh, geez, I've thought about homeschooling, as Gary and Suzanne have said, or I'm just thrown into this by the circumstances of, the pandemic. Invite yourself to think of these other questions, like who would you, are there some families that, hey, we seem to get along with these other parents, and maybe we could kind of work on some stuff together, and think about what that home space, what do you want it to be ideally anyway, whether your kids are in school or not, and and don't forget the food.
Yeah, I think, with our play group was set up with this group called Simply Living. And so it was called the Simply Living Play Group. So it's kind of self-selecting in that way, that it was people that had that interest, that were kind of interested in that and in raising children, thinking about simple living. Although people have said that the Malleys, at least, can't do anything simply. So I don't know why you're talking about simply living, because we kind of make things very complicated. We've heard that from many people. And also through that playgroup, we developed a real sense of trust in each other, trusting each other with each other's kids. And that was something that just developed naturally, I think. And that we really respect each other and honor everybody's differences. And so I think that was part of what kind of led to this. And also thinking about, for those of you, like Michael said, who might be more thrown into the homeschooling right now, that are just trying to think what to do, it's going to look a little different than some of the things we're talking about, because just because we were not doing it during the time of COVID until now, which we are, and ours is going to look a little different now because, yeah, we did come together a lot with people many times a week, and with a number of people. And I think with COVID, you're going to have to think about a few families coming together, and not such a large number. So just kind of adapting what we say. We're going to talk about our experiences, but you would be adapting some of them. I think the one thing I wanted, I definitely want Gary to share a little bit about what you felt when Aaron came home, and how you felt about your responsibilities, how they got increased when Aaron left school and came home to homeschool, because that really influenced, that really is, yeah. Good.
It was a big, it was a shock really to realize how many things that we give to the school system to take care of for our kids, and that once they come home, we are now responsible for everything. And that includes, I mean, at the time it was like they teach them what to do in a fire drill, and they teach them what, how to wash their hands the special way, and just on and on and on, and how many things that as parents we kind of pass to the school system just automatically. We don't probably even think about it. And like handwriting was one thing that I had just expected that they would take care of. And my kid came home and he couldn't write at all, couldn't do any kind of printing or writing, and that was something that I just had to help him with. And it was a shock to me how much we give away when we send our kids to school, and another shock that I have to take care of it when they come home.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of parents, yeah, that's really what they're realizing is how much the schools have taken over, from feeding our kids, but just really being a babysitter for a good amount of time that we just take that for granted, that we're going to have our kids taken care of and programmed for a good part of their day, 5 days a week. And so those parents that are trying to work, two parents that are trying to work full time and then trying to homeschool on top of that's a challenging thing. We had one single parent, I think, that homeschooled with us. I think with just one, and she was very involved. But we also when her daughter was younger, like elementary school, she spent a lot of time with us, and we did some homeschooling, which was wonderful. We had her and our other two older kids, kind of the three of them, together a lot, and that's kind of how she did it. That when she was working, we had her here homeschooling with us some. So it is I think a challenge when both people are working full time, and so that's something to think about. If people could be working opposite schedules, or if somebody's job could be reduced to part-time, because it does take time to homeschool. I know you talked about, Suzanne, that I really liked, about that you felt like you should have all this time because you were staying at home. But do you want to talk about that a little bit when you realized that?
Oh, I remember. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I was in a doctor's office and I saw this magazine called Working Mother, and I think the headline was something about how to get dinner on the table in the half an hour after you're home from work. And I'm like, I need that. I need to know how to get dinner on the table in a half an hour because I've been busy all day doing homeschooling. And it like dawned on me. I'm like, I'm kind of a working mother, so. So yeah, and then just sort of reflecting on what you all are talking about in the topic of collaborative homeschooling, one thing that I've always thought is that it's in some ways the homeschooling forced us to be collaborative. I mean, if my kids were in school and I had a dentist appointment, I would just go to my dentist appointment. But if my kids are homeschooled and I have a dentist appointment and I don't have any kid old enough to babysit my other kids, then I'm reaching out to my community, to somebody to say, could you watch my kid for that hour and a half? And so I, in some ways, the need that I had was pushed me outside my comfort zone maybe a little bit, so that I was asking other people for favors. And then you know what? They are asking me for favors. And so I guess, what am I trying to say? Like the I almost want to call it the predicament that it put me in really pushed me outside my comfort zone, so that then it spurred me to develop the trust and to deepen relationships. And I see now, I mean, that's for me one of the benefits, is that it allowed me to operate just in other things too in a more trusting and collaborative way.
Okay, so when we started homeschooling together, the collaborative homeschooling, I think maybe the first thing we did that still is continuing to this day, although maybe not this year, is our science club. So you guys, and Suzanne's been leader, but Gary was really involved as co-leader for a number of years with that. So how did that even start? I mean, I think you started, you started it, Suzanne, right? Or Gary started? I'm not sure how that even started. Is it Suzanne?
Oh, I mean, that's my educational background is science, and so sort of on the topic of um, how do you work together? It was a friend of mine who said, you want to do something for science for these kids. So there were maybe about 5 kids, and this was the first year I homeschooled Aaron, so it would have been about 2006, I would say. Um, and it's really evolved since then, but we have done it here, and it's been a multi-age science group that we've really tried to do a lot of hands-on stuff, the kind of stuff that you wouldn't want to make the mess in your own home if it were only for like one kid. But it's totally worth it if you're getting all this stuff and the supplies and making the mess with half a dozen kids or so. So, and then also we've, I think, learned over the years that hands-on type of stuff really works well for multiple ages, because everybody's going to get something different out of it. You can watch a demonstration or um, make observations in nature or whatever it is, the science activity that you're working on. People can engage on different levels, and there's something for the younger and the older to look at. I don't know. Did I answer your question, Ollie?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like the one room schoolhouse was part of this, because right now, let's just talk about last year. We had kids how young and then how old were in the science
Well, for the science
last year.
that we were in, it was pretty much second through eighth grade last year. So, depending on the year and which families we had, it, it's not, the average age changes, and then the age span changes. And last year when we had second through eighth graders, we did have a little bit of differentiation about which kinds of activities the middle schoolers and the younger kids were doing, and a lot of sort of flexibility about where the kids in the middle could go. So I guess I just want to step back for just a second and say that, like, the way we organize this is sort of, we would have maybe a day of the week where we would do the science, maybe 3 times a month or something. And so then there would be a group of families that were involved in the science. And then Ollie and Michael, you had some book discussions or literature, humanities groups that you took the lead on, and that would happen a different day, and it would be overlapping people, but not exactly the same people. And then Gary, you did some media. We did a media club and some logic, and that was different, but overlapping groups. So I think it's really easy to sort of get, like you were saying, Ollie and Michael, about if we get in the mindset of how a school works, maybe it's hard to understand kind of how fluid and flexible things can actually be in homeschooling. That it's like, well, on Tuesday afternoons we go over to this person's house and talk about a book and have a snack, and that's English for that day. I'm not sure I'm articulating that, but I guess I just wanted to speak for a minute about how there are overlapping circles of people doing things. It's not necessarily all the same group of people.
Mm-hmm.
There is this programming where you figure out what's going to work for what kids at what times. It probably sounds a little daunting when you say, wait, how do you do science from second grade till eighth grade? And usually we'd be breaking, or at least I think in science, usually you'd be breaking up into at least 2 different groups. And so I think there's something about, I think there's a trust in learning too that we share. I've always loved the quote that's attributed to William Butler Yeats. We don't know if he actually said it, but it's attributed to him. Education is not filling a bucket, but lighting a fire. And we don't know if he actually said that, but it's such a lovely quote. I felt that as a teacher in the classroom, and just as strongly, if not more so, as a homeschool parent, that yes, there are certain things we want to make sure the kids get. You want to learn how to do long division. You want to learn how to do this writing, or to be able to analyze a story and all these different things, or certain science facts, etc. And so there's certain things checking off the list, but a large part of at least my personal attitude towards education is, how do we keep that energy, that excitement, that curiosity? Because guess what? Even when I was teaching a 3rd grade or a 1st grade classroom, there was a range of kiddos in there with different strengths and different interests. And so we have that same thing with our homeschool community. And kids can support each other and help each other in their learning. And so there's a lot of that peer work that's going on. But there's also just sort of the, one of the things I like to think about is, most kiddos, when they come into kindergarten, if they come from a reasonably healthy home, they're excited about school. They're excited about learning. They come in with the crayons and the sharp pencil, and they can't wait. And oftentimes, sadly, after just a couple of years, that excitement is gone. And I think that's one of the things that we share, and that can it manifests in all different kinds of ways. I don't have the strengths in the science as Suzanne does, or, I don't have, Ollie has great strengths in these big projects that I'm not as good at. But I have hopefully some strengths that I could bring to the table, and creating that energy and that excitement, and that it's fun to learn. Because guess what? In the classroom, there's a lot of time spent not on learning. Right? If you're in a public or private school, there's a lot of time spent on discipline and organizing and everything else. And so, I don't think any of us are laissez-faire in this, but there can be a certain amount of ease, I think. Just, I'm thinking of Suzanne talking about that family reading the books. It doesn't have to be a source of tension. And I think of the Ollie was saying about how programmatic, our lives can become pretty programmed. And I think that one of the things we've done is try to create space to explore and to learn in that way. So that's one of the things that I appreciate about homeschooling. Yeah.
I'm wondering if I could chime in with maybe a concrete example of what you were just talking about, Michael. And that is one of our science afternoons that we did this year in probably February 2020. So we were talking about, our theme was we were going to be doing water for that semester, and we were talking about different chemical substances. This was with this group with 2nd and 8th graders. So we had a day when we were going to be talking about carbon dioxide. And one of the things we got was dry ice, which I firmly believe that everybody ought to play with dry ice at least once a year when they're homeschooled. So we had some dry ice, we had a pH indicator, and we had some water. And we did some work talking about what carbon dioxide is, about the chemistry. Obviously, we went into a little more detail about the chemistry and the bonds with the middle schoolers up to 8th grade. And then we used straws to breathe into the water that had the pH indicator and saw the color change when the carbon dioxide that we exhale goes in. And then we got the dry ice out and put it in bowls, and there was dish soap and food coloring and a really big mess. In fact, there were like bubbles and steam coming off the kitchen floor by the end of it. And so, and then we were also, we had some times when we were talking about stuff. So there were lessons there, sure, about what is, maybe for the younger kids, it was what's the difference between a solid and a gas. And maybe for the older kids, it was, what are the names for when things move from one phase to another? And what does that mean to have elements bonded to each other? So there's like science content there, but there's also this other lesson that I'm hoping, and I think that day, they don't all go great, but that day I think people really did walk away going, wow, science is fun. Like I hung around with my buddies and we, played around with this dry ice and we experimented with like, well, what happens if you put cold water on the dry ice? What happens if you put hot water on the dry ice? And for me, and that's just what the example that came to my mind, Michael, when I was hearing you talk about lighting a fire. It's not so much what is being taught that day. I mean, that's important too, but it's more, well, are they curious enough to go on and want to learn more about science and do more about science? And that's what I hope that they get out of a science lesson.
If I can jump in, I gotta say that it's been 3 years since we've homeschooled, and just hearing you guys talk about it makes me I'm really missing the homeschooling, being in science club and all that kind of stuff. I think one of the issues that parents might be thinking about was how much time do you need to spend on all these things? And science club was a great lesson for me, and I think it was maybe 2 to 3 hours a week that we would spend in science club. And kids might have gotten some more science at home. Sometimes they didn't, like they didn't often get a lot more science in my home. But the overall amount of science knowledge and understanding that they came out with was phenomenal. I mean, I can speak for my own kids going into the public schools, and they knew already a lot of the stuff that they were teaching in the public schools after they'd gone through the science club. I think it's the focused time of just a few hours a week. Certainly the lessons were really well planned, and so there was a lot of stuff there, but it was fun stuff, and it was something that really engaged them. And I think that was it really stuck. And I think that parents don't have to feel like they have to plan out, 2 hours of this every day for the whole week to expect that things are that you're gonna cover all the bases that way.
Yeah, and let me just say, on a science club day, like that was most of what we did. And I got to the point where like I was fine doing the planning for the science activities like right during the middle of the school day. And I think that there's value not only in having like a dedicated, well, I can see where it would be overwhelming to plan stuff like, oh, late at night after the kids go to sleep. And I think one of the things that I evolved, maybe out of necessity more than, and now I'm creating a philosophy around it, but like, I didn't mind planning right in front of my kids. And like, they might help me plan or they didn't help me plan, but they saw me getting excited about something and I was working. So I felt like that was good education for them, and I didn't worry about having to get that all done before the school day started.
I think I remember many times you saying when you were thinking about what things to cover, well, what are the things that excite us as teachers? Because that's the thing that's going to really excite the kids. And the topics that we don't get excited about, maybe we don't we don't cover yet. And then but the things that we get excited about, they're going to really like too.
Yeah, and the freedom that homeschooling gives for us as adult learners is, I mean, obviously different situations are going to have different amounts of freedom, but I have enjoyed the freedom to really like learn deeply about something that I get really interested in. And again, just for my kids to watch me learn deeply about something that I'm really interested in, I'm hoping, and I do see, like with my kids too, they're going on and learning deeply about stuff that they're really interested in. They've seen this model of how does that work? Where does mom look to do the research? What kinds of books does she read, and websites? And
One of the things that I would say is having a son who's now a junior in college and a daughter who's about to start college is, and we see this with our 13-year-old as well, is there's still a love of learning, right? And it's not always, sometimes it's a chore, and I want to knock on wood in terms of, I'm always afraid to say something good about my kiddos or our kiddos, but I think our son Mishak has even commented, like, he's a little surprised that, he's at a, great small liberal arts college, but he'll even meet so many students who, it's like the learning is, yeah, you have to do it, but there's not just like that, wow, I want to learn about philosophy now, something you didn't study and, as a high school student, or I want to learn about, this idea, or, learn about psychology, or whatever it might be. So I think that if we can create that space where, and I'm sure if we do this another time, we'll talk more about how often we'll have the kiddos help us to decide what to study, and so we bring, not only, as Gary said, our own energies, we bring their energies as well to the table. It just adds such richness, and I think, for me, I keep going back to what I call the big questions of, like, what are my long-term goals here? What's the goal in terms of, what am I trying to do in terms of whatever role, Ollie and I have as parents and as homeschool teachers, with who are we trying to help these kiddos to become, and so, a lot of it's on them, a lot of it's, the community, but what's our role with that? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think learning how to learn and being excited about learning, at least K through 5, K through 5th grade, and I think K through 8, I mean, that's kind of the primary goal, because there's so much you can learn about, that it's giving kids basics so that they, can do really good reading and writing and math skills, but it is making them excited about learning. And I don't, you're not going to hit it, you're not going to cover everything. So that wasn't our goal. Once they get into high school, we made sure that we checked off that they know these things, and they took what they needed, the classes they needed to take to get into college. And so some of those things they might have missed K through 8, hopefully they got then. But yeah, those first 8 years, it's more about excitement. It's more about wanting to learn. It's more about them finding what they're passionate about, and them kind of taking control of their learning. And it's that is such a fun thing to watch. Finally, that and it just started happening with our 13-year-old actually during quarantine, because before then I was a little bit more pulling teeth with him, and he just kind of got on fire during quarantine for whatever reason, and found a number of things that he was passionate about. And of course, it's going to go back and forth. And he's in 8th grade this year, but so there's certain things that we're going to want to cover. But that has been a goal of ours. Also, to have fun with the kids and have fun ourselves. So I think you guys mentioned that, like, all of us, I think, have had so much fun learning different things. Suzanne doing a lot of the science, Gary with the media and the critical thinking, and I've done some big projects with the kids, and I'm doing literature now, which I am so loving. So I'm picking books that I'm interested in. And actually, we're doing a kind of humanities where we do literature and then do history. And so taking that excitement and then hopefully transferring some of that onto the kids is what we really hope to happen. And then have them ready too for going to college. And Michael and I feel a little better that we've gotten 3 kids to college, one who went through the school system, and she's actually back in graduate school right now, so she's 32 and still loving to learn. And then we can know that this can work, that you don't, so it gives us some freedom not to be so worried. Like they were able to be a little bit looser. They never took standardized tests. Our 2 middle kids until they were in 10th or 11th grade, whenever they took the PSAT, was the first standardized test that they took. And so they never filled in boxes, but they didn't need to until that point, and it was, it was fine. And they were able to do well enough to get into college. So.
I want to throw in here too, and I've probably done this even more than the other 3 of you, but also please know the hit and miss nature of all this. We could do another full hour on homeschooling gone badly. The days when nothing worked, the days when, oh my gosh, I can't believe my kids just, it is feeling like pulling teeth, or you see your friends' children and they're just like eyes glazed over. So give yourself some room with this stuff too. Know that, and guess what? It's the same for the classroom teachers, right? That you have the days when it works and you have the days when it doesn't. So please, this first day, of course, we want to highlight things that, we're getting juiced talking about the homeschooling, but we could go another direction and talk about what doesn't work. That's part of the deal too. Yeah.
Here, I have my famous quote. At the end of the year, we do, I talk to the kids a lot about what worked and what didn't. And at one point on one topic, my 7-year-old said, Mom, I think on that, the more you talk, the less I learn. So that was one of my homeschool gone awry. That was not a successful subject that year for her. So, but that's okay. She's 7 and we're all learning. And I think the other part about learning to learn at home is about just learning to spend so much time together and learning for kids to have these big swaths of time and not have it necessarily be structured by someone else, and that's a process, and that it's harder at the beginning than it is eventually, and that kids really can learn how to choose to spend their time on different things and how to get along with siblings and all these things that if you're not used to everybody being there most of the day, a lot of the days, they seem really difficult, but it does get easier.
Yeah, and that every child is different, and the parent-child relationship with each child, and if you're living in a home with 2 parents, I mean, there's so many dynamics going on there. So, like, what might work with one child certainly might not work with another, and there's going to be a lot of frustration too. I mean, there's just a lot of frustration from the parents and from the kids on a daily basis. There will be some frustration in general, like Michael said, and maybe even months or many months of, maybe math is just not working for months and months, and that could happen. And so trying again and trying it in a new way, and knowing that kids really, in a school setting, you're getting math for a certain amount of time each day all year round, but in a home setting, it can get condensed. Like maybe you don't do something for months, but then in a couple months you can make up for that time that they lost, or maybe even a year. We didn't start doing didn't have a math curriculum until like 4th grade for our oldest. And then that's when we started, and he was able then to catch up after, and we had done lots of math things, but we hadn't done a curriculum. And so, yeah, I mean, just knowing that it like we can give you, we probably will give hints at some point or some ideas, but your relationship with your child, that's one of the gifts that you're going to get through this, and you get to spend a lot more time with your child, learn more about your child. But it's also frustrating to have to be in the teacher role, which people have been doing this long enough for the last 6 months or so in quarantine, or 4 or 5 months in quarantine, that you probably felt that it's that there's with anything that is really a benefit, there's also things that are really frustrating about it. So, and know that we've all of us, all 4 of us, because I know I've talked that we've been really frustrated at times and wonder what we're doing, and are we going to mess up our kids? And so that we've all been there, and just but usually when we look back, we're like, yeah, but all these things did happen.
This is one of the lovely aspects of collaborative homeschooling too, because my kiddos could be so sick of their dad being their teacher, and then it's just so refreshing that, oh, we're going to Suzanne's today, or we're going to Gary's today, and it's something different and it's something new. So again, that's another thing that I think is helpful for us as collaborative homeschool parents.
And so I think, I don't know if anybody has any closing words for this. They said we'd probably do about an hour today, and then I think we might talk some. I think we have a lot more to talk about. I kept writing notes down, and most of that we haven't gotten to. But are there any ending comments people want to make, and before we end for today?
Well, I think just, I guess I'd reiterate, I think you heard it in a lot of different ways. Joy, relationships, flexibility, perseverance, good food, and trust. I think all of those are just some of the many words that just kind of floating through my mind as we're talking. Yeah.
All right.
Building trusting relationships and building caring relationships, and then building on the love of learning.
Great. I'm going to mention one thing that I do have written down here that I just want to mention, that all of us, collaborative homeschooling, we've collaborated on different things, but we also did a lot of homeschooling on our individual families. Yeah, and like Suzanne said, we collaborated in different circles too. So there's some collaboration, and then some individual things, and individual maybe things you do with your children as a group or individual. So there's a mixture of all that goes into this. And it's a dance. And working with other people, but it's been a lot of fun so far. And actually, I'm going to mention to you guys that I'm hoping, Gary, that maybe we could bring you back into this, since kids are going to be home now, that maybe we could have a day at a park, is my thought. If your kids might want to come out and come to a park, and we can ask some of the other people that are back in school now too, that we might be able to bring back the play group, even with our teenage children. So, and even with social distancing. So that's one thing I'm thinking about for this year, and we'll probably be processing here too some of the other things we're thinking about of how to do collaborative homeschooling with COVID-19. So
That sounds great. I mean, my kids are going to be home because of COVID, and they really need connection with other kids too.
Oh. Well, thank you everybody so much. This was wonderful. I'm having so much fun. Thanks for playing with this, and we'll try it again if you guys are up for it.
Great.
Okay. So we'll talk
Thanks for
about it.
organizing that.